Hello, and welcome to the Let's Read portion of the show, where we take a moment to appreciate the literature of Skyrim. Today, we will be reading A Dance in Fire, Chapter 1, by Wegan Jarrah. Scene: the Imperial City, Cyrodiil. Date: 7 Frostfall, 3rd Era, 397. It seemed as if the palace had always housed the Adeles Building Commission, the company of clerks and estate agents who authored and notarized nearly every construction of any note in the Empire. It stood for 250 years, since the reign of the Emperor Magnus, a plain-fronted and austere hall on the minor but respectable plaza in the Imperial City. Energetic and ambitious middle-class lads and ladies worked there, as well as complacent middle-aged ones, like Decimus Scotti. No one could imagine a world without the Commission, least of all Scotti. To be accurate, he could not imagine a world without himself in the Commission. Lord Adeles is perfectly aware of your contributions, said the managing clerk, closing the shutters that demarcated Scotty's office behind him. But you know that things have been difficult. Yes, said Scotty stiffly. Lord Vintage's men have been giving us a lot of competition lately, and we must be more efficient if we are to survive. Unfortunately, that means releasing some of our historically best but presently underachieving senior clerks. I understand. Can't be helped. I'm glad that you understand, smiled the managing clerk, smiling thinly and withdrawing. Please, have your room cleaned immediately. Scotty began the task of organizing all his work to pass on to his successor. It would probably be young Imbrelius who would take most of it on, which was as it should be, he considered philosophically. The lad knew how to find business. Scotty wondered idly what the fellow would do with the contract for the new statue of Saint Alicia for which the Temple of the One had applied. Probably invent a clerical error, blame it on his old predecessor, Decimus Scotti, and require an additional cost to rectify. I have correspondence for Decimus Scotti of the Adeles Building Commission. Scotty looked up. A fat-faced courier had entered his office and was thrusting forth a sealed scroll. He handed the boy a gold piece and opened it up. By the poor penmanship, atrocious spelling and grammar, and overall unprofessional tone, it was manifestly evident who the writer was. Lloyd's Juris, a fellow clerk some years before, who had left the commission after being accused of unethical business practice. Dear Scotty, I imagine you always wonder what happened to me, and the last place you would have expected to find me is out in the woods. But that's exactly where I am. Ha ha. If you're smart and want to make lots of gold for Lord Adeles and yourself, you'll come down to Valenwood too. If you haven't, or have been following the politics here lately, you may or may not know that there's been a war between the Bosmer and their neighbors elsewhere over the past 2 years. Things have only just calmed down, and there's a lot that needs to be rebuilt. Now I've got more business than I can handle, but I need someone with some clout, someone representing a respected agency to get the quill in the ink. That someone is you, my friend. Come and meet me at the M there, Pasker Tavern in Fallenstein, Valenwood. I'll be here 2 weeks, and you won't be sorry. Juris. P.S. Bring a wagon load of timber if you can. What do you have there, Scotty? Asked a voice. Scotty started. It was Imbrius, his damnably handsome face peeking through the shutters, smiling in that way that melted the hearts of the stingiest of patrons and the roughest of stonemasons. Scotty shoved the letter in his jacket pocket. "Personal correspondence," he sniffed. "I'll be cleaned up here in just a moment." "I don't want to hurry you," said Imbrius, grabbing a few sheets of blank contract from Scotty's desk. "I've just gone through a stack, and the junior scribe's hands are all cramping up, so I thought you wouldn't miss a few." The lad vanished. Scotty retrieved the letter and read it again. He thought about his life, something he rarely did. It seemed a sea of gray, with a black insurmountable wall looming. There was only one narrow passage he could see in that wall. Quickly, before he had a moment to reconsider it, he grabbed a dozen of the blank contracts with a shimmering gold leaf. Atrius Building Commission, by appointment of His Imperial Majesty, and hid them in the satchel with his personal effects. The next day he began his adventure with a giddy lack of hesitation. He arranged for a seat in a caravan bound for Valenwood, the single escorted convoyance to the southeast leaving the Imperial City that week. He had scarcely hours to pack, but he remembered to purchase a wagon-load of timber. "It will be extra gold to pay for a horse to pull that," frowned the convoy head. "So I anticipated," smiled Scotty, with his best and brilliant grin. 10 wagons in all set off that afternoon, through the familiar Cyrodiilic countryside, past fields of wildflowers, gently rolling woodlands, friendly hamlets. The clop of the horses' hooves against the sound-stone road reminded Scotty that the Atrius Building Commissions constructed it. 5 of the 18 necessary contracts for its completion were drafted by his own hand. "Very smart of you to bring that wood along," said a gray-whiskered Breton man next to him on his wagon. "You must be in commerce." "Of a sort," said Scotty, in a way he hoped was mysterious, before introducing himself. "Decimus Scotty." "Griff Malin," said the man. "I'm a poet. Actually, a translator of old Bosmer literature. I was researching some newly discovered tracts of the Minorlian Playbar 2 years ago when the war broke out and I had to leave. You are no doubt familiar with the Minorid if you are aware of the Green Pact." Scotty thought the man might be speaking perfect gibberish, but he nodded his head. "Naturally, I don't pretend that the Minorid is as renowned as the Me Elidion, or as ancient as the Dan Siragol, but I think it has a remarkable significance to understanding the nature of the Mirolithic Bosmer mind. The origin of the wood elf aversion to cutting their own wood or eating any plant material at all. Yet, paradoxically, their willingness to import plant stuff from other cultures I feel can be linked to a passage in the Minorid. Malin shuffled through some of his papers, searching for the appropriate text. To Scotty's vast relief, the carriage soon stopped to camp for the night. They were high on a bluff over the gray stream, and before them was the great valley of Valenwood. Only the cry of seabirds declared the presence of the ocean to the bay to the west. Here the timber was so tall and wide, twisting around itself like an impossible knot begun eons ago to be impenetrable. A few more modest trees, only 50 feet to the lowest branch, stood on the cliff at the edge of camp. The sight was so alien to Scotty, and he found himself so anxious about the proposition of entering the wilderness that he could not imagine sleeping. Fortunately, Malin had supposed he had found another academic with a passion for the riddles of the ancient culture. Long into the night, he recited Bosmer verses in the original and in his own translation, sobbing and bellowing and whispering wherever appropriate. Gradually, Scotty began to feel drowsy, but a sudden crack of wood snapping made him sit straight up. "What was that?" Malin smiled. "I like it too. Convocation in the malignity of the moonless speculum, a dance of fire." "There are some enormous birds up in the trees moving around," whispered Scotty, pointing in the direction of the dark shapes above. "I wouldn't worry about that," said Malin, irritated with his audience. Now listen to how the poet characterizes Herman Maura's invocation of the 18th stanza of the 4th book. Dark shapes in the trees, where some of them perched like birds, others slithered like snakes, and still others stood up straight like men. As Malin recited his verse, Scotty watched the figures softly leap from branch to branch, half gliding across the impossible distance for anything without wings. They gathered in groups and then reorganized until they had spread to every tree around the camp. Suddenly they plummeted from the heights. "Mara!" cried Scotty. "They're falling like rain!" "Probably seed pods." Malin shrugged, not turning around. Some of the trees had remarkable. The camp erupted into chaos. Fires burst out in the wagons. The horses wailed from mortal blows. Casks of wine, fresh water, and liquor gushed their contents to the ground. A nimble shadow dashed past Scotty and Malin, gathering sacks of grain and gold with impossible agility and grace. Scotty had only a glance at it, lit up by a sudden nearby burst of flame. It was a sleek creature with pointed ears, wide yellow eyes, multi-pied fur, and a tail like a whip. "Werewolf," he whispered, shrinking back. "Cathay rat," groaned Malin. "Much worse. Khajiit cousins or some such thing, come to plunder." "Are you sure?" As quickly as they struck, the creatures retreated, diving off the bluff before the battle mage and knight, the caravan's escorts, had fully opened their eyes. Malin and Scotty ran to the precipice and saw 100 feet below the tiny figures dash out of the water, shaking themselves and disappearing into the woods. "Werewolves aren't acrobats like that," said Malin. "They were definitely Cathay-rat. Bastard thieves. Thanks Stendar, they didn't realize the value of my notebooks. It wasn't a complete loss." Thank you for joining us for another episode of Shadow's Let's Read the Books of Skyrim.